Picture yourself on a car lot midweek, let's say a Tuesday. You've got the cash ready to go and your credit is perfect. You're there to buy a vehicle, but there are practically none to be found. The place is a ghost town. All that's left is a wrinkled, forgotten-looking sedan with a dealer markup so high it rivals your freshman year of college. What's going on? It's because some factory in Malaysia lost power for a day 3 weeks back. Or it could be that a container ship got wedged sideways in a canal in Egypt. Or perhaps it's because a couple of politicians half a world away have had a falling out and are now giving each other the silent treatment. For the last 30 years we were living in a dream world. We operated under the assumption that the globe was a level playing field, where national borders were merely suggestions on a map, and you could source components for a smartphone from 12 separate nations, put it all together in a 13th and then market it in a 14th with 0 interruptions. This interconnected system was called globalization. It brought us incredibly cheap clothing, $500 4K televisions and fresh avocados in the middle of winter. But I have to break it to you, that whole party has come to an end. The staff is flicking the lights on and off the DJ has packed up, and the massive geopolitical headache is only now starting to set in. You're now entering the age of deglobalization. This is the dawn of competing trade blocs, and if you thought the previous inflation was rough, you better hold on tight. The conversation today goes way beyond economics. We're discussing the very foundation of our modern world. For a very long time, specifically from when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 until about 2016, the planet experienced what economists refer to as the peak era of globalization. A certain intellectual confidence was made famous by it. Francis Fukuyama, who called it the end of history. His premise was straightforward. The battle was over and liberal democracy paired with free market capitalism were the victors. Major wars were a thing of the past because, let's be honest, who would attack a nation that manufactures your athletic shoes? It was the McDonald's doctrine of international harmony. The theory that no two nations housing a McDonald's would ever declare war on each other. Well, that idea has not held up very well, has it? Today, that unified world is splintering apart. We're witnessing a mass retreat from the wide-open waters of global commerce and a return to heavily defended separate zones. You have the bloc aligned with the United States, the one aligned with China, and then the uncommitted nations attempting to court both superpowers just to secure a better price on crude oil. This has consequences far beyond politics. This is the reason your new refrigerator costs so much more, and why your company might be relocating its operations yet again. And it explains why the coming 10 years will be completely unrecognizable from the past 30. We're about to explore exactly how we got here, what's driving this change and the real impact it will have on your personal finances. Let's dive in. First up, the death of just-in-time and the rise of just-in-case. To grasp why globalization is unraveling, you must first get acquainted with the philosophy that dominated the business world for 40 years. It was known as just-in-time, or JET. Let me paint you a picture. You're a high-level manager at a huge manufacturing firm back in 1995. You walk through your warehouse and see pallets of tires, crates filled with microprocessors and huge rolls of steel just waiting around. From your perspective, that isn't just inventory, it's dormant capital. It's money just sitting there losing value and gathering dust. So you bring in a high-priced consultant. He peers at you over his minimalist eyeglasses and asks, "What's the point of stockpiling components? Imagine if the delivery truck dropped off the tires precisely 4 hours before they were needed on the assembly line." This was the revolutionary concept from the Toyota production system. It was ingenious, it was hyper-efficient. It wrung every last drop of potential profit from the logistics network. Businesses virtually eliminated their stockpiles. Warehouses were sold and converted into fashionable urban lofts. The entire world's economy began to operate like a perfectly choreographed ballet, where a component manufactured in Shenzhen on a Monday would show up in Los Angeles by Wednesday and land on a customer's doorstep by Friday. The whole system was a logistical marvel. But there's a fatal flaw baked into all that efficiency. Being hyper-efficient makes you incredibly fragile. When you operate with zero excess, you have no buffer for shocks. The just-in-time model is flawless, provided the world operates without a single hiccup. But the world is never perfect. And then the 2020s arrived, the decade where Murphy's Law went into overdrive. You remember the Ever Given, right? That colossal container ship that tried to pull a Tokyo drift in the Suez Canal and ended up wedged sideways. A single ship brought $60 billion of global trade to a screeching halt. It blocked everything from toilet paper and coffee to, most importantly, the supply of garden gnomes for all of Europe. And thanks to just-in-time, no one had any inventory stockpiled. The moment a single link snapped the entire global machine ground to a halt, Or consider the great chip shortage of 2021. Automakers like Ford and GM had spent decades moving their chip manufacturing overseas to East Asia, relying almost entirely on Taiwan's TSMC. They held absolutely nothing in reserve, because in the old model holding inventory was just wasting money. Then the pandemic changed everything. The car giants slashed their chip orders, assuming the economy would crater and no one would be buying new vehicles. Except everyone took their government stimulus money and stuck at home started buying PlayStations and new laptops like crazy. So the chip factories pivoted, churning out silicon for companies like Sony and Apple. Then when the automakers returned hats in hand saying, "All right, we need those chips we cancelled," the foundries basically told them get in line. The new lead time was 52 weeks. This left billions of dollars worth of nearly completed trucks just collecting dust in massive parking lots, all because they couldn't get their hands on a single $2 part. That right there is the spectacular failure of just in time. So what's the new model? We are entering the era of just in case. And in boardrooms across the world, executives are running scared. Their priority is no longer pinching every last penny of efficiency. It's all about supply chain security now. Companies are constructing enormous warehouses once again. They are stockpiling components. They're friendshoring, relocating production away from potential rivals like China and into allied nations like Mexico or Vietnam. Or they're reshoring by bringing manufacturing all the way back home. All of this creates huge inflationary pressure. Why? Because holding inventory is expensive. It costs a lot more to build a new factory in Arizona than it does in Guangdong. Paying an American or Mexican worker is more expensive than paying one in Vietnam. And who do you think ultimately absorbs all these new costs? You do. The age of the $10 toaster is coming to an end because the global supply chain that made it possible, a system built on a fragile assumption of global harmony and seamless logistics, has shattered. We're now choosing reliability over pure efficiency. We're swapping rock-bottom prices for the simple assurance that the item we want to buy will actually be on the shelf. And this change is only the beginnings, because while corporations are rearranging their supply chains to safeguard their bottom line, entire nations are doing it to ensure their very survival. And speaking of survival, drop a comment below. Are you seeing shrinkflation hit your grocery bill? Or are you just relieved to find the shelves aren't bare? Number 2, weaponized interdependence, or how you can bring a nation to its knees using a tiny piece of silicon. If you're looking for the precise moment the old era of globalization ended, I can pinpoint it for you. It wasn't the day Russia rolled into Ukraine. It wasn't the Brexit vote. The date was October 7th, 2022. On that particular Friday afternoon, as most of America was winding down for the weekend, the US Bureau of Industry and Security, a deliberately dull name for an incredibly powerful agency, launched what amounted to an economic war against China's entire tech industry. But their weapons weren't missiles. They used a 139-page document. This piece of paper blocked the sale of the planet's most sophisticated semiconductors to China. And even more critically, it banned the export of the equipment needed to manufacture them. And this leads us to a term you absolutely have to understand: weaponized interdependence. For decades, the prevailing wisdom was that if countries were economically intertwined, they'd be far too focused on getting rich to ever go to war. It was famously called the Golden Arches theory of conflict prevention. However, academics Henry Farrell and Abraham Newman analysed this global system and uncovered a much grimmer reality. They saw that the network wasn't a decentralised web at all, but rather a structure with powerful centres and dependent connections. The terrifying implication is that whoever commands the centre can effectively choke off all the connected points. A prime illustration of this is a company called ASML. In the quiet Dutch town of Veldhoven, a place most people would never know exists, lies a site of immense global significance. This unassuming location is home to the headquarters of ASML, arguably the most critical company in today's world. This firm holds an absolute monopoly as the sole producer on the entire planet of a technology called extreme ultraviolet or EUV lithography machines. Each one of these massive devices is as big as a city bus, carries a price tag of $200 million, and performs an incredible feat using lasers to obliterate tiny tin droplets. This process, repeated 50,000 times, every second generates a light more intense than the surface of the sun, which is then used to etch circuits of nearly atomic scale. To put it simply, without these machines from ASML, the iPhone 15 would not exist. The NVIDIA H100 AI chip would be impossible to produce, and no country could maintain a cutting-edge military force. This critical vulnerability was not lost on either China or the United States. Consequently, on October the 7th, 2022, America made its move, pressuring both the Netherlands and Japan to halt all sales of these essential machines to China. Put yourself in the shoes of a technology executive in China on the morning of October 8th. Your production lines are still active for now, but a chilling realization dawns: within a couple of years your vital equipment will inevitably fail and there will be no way to get replacement parts. Access to crucial software upgrades is gone, and purchasing the next generation of machines is completely out of the question. What you're witnessing is the slow-motion collapse of your entire sector, a development that shattered the very foundation of trust on which globalization is built. When America can cripple your nation's technology industry simply due to a disagreement over international policy, any future dependence on its technology becomes unthinkable. The only logical response is to become self-sufficient. You'd have no choice but to create an independent alternative, which is precisely the course of action now underway. The result is the emergence of a fractured hardware landscape featuring a distinct Chinese technology ecosystem and a separate one for the West. These two systems are designed to be mutually exclusive, antagonistic, and incredibly costly. As a fascinating aside, the latest generation of ASML's machines are so colossal, it takes a fleet of 3 Boeing 747s just to ship a single one. It's no surprise then that their export is now controlled with the same severity as nuclear armaments. Number 3, the great energy decoupling marking the death of the Wendell Dirk Handel philosophy. If the battle for chips represents the strategic mind of deglobalization, then the conflict over energy is its lifeblood and the sudden cardiac arrest that followed. For 30 years, Germany, serving as Europe's industrial powerhouse, operated on a straightforward principle known as Wandel durch Handel. The concept, which translates to change through trade, was incredibly appealing in its simplicity. The arrangement was that Germany would purchase low-cost natural gas from Russia, allowing Russia to prosper and remain content. In return, that inexpensive energy would fuel the production of everything from BMWs to industrial chemicals, while Russia's reliance on our euros would deter any aggression. It was a win-win scenario, a perfectly harmonious vision. But that dream was sad to suburb when Vladimir Putin decided to forge a new reality. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the whole economic foundation of Europe rumbled in an instant. Germany was forced to confront the fact that depending on a geopolitical adversary for 55% of its natural gas wasn't a viable business plan. It was in fact a self-destructive agreement. And at this point, the narrative takes a truly sinister turn. Instead of ceasing, globalization simply morphed, moving into the shadows of the world economy. Russia continues to export vast quantities of its oil, just not openly to ports like Hamburg or London. The new route involves selling it to intermediary nations like India and China, where it gets processed and unbelievably resold right back to Europe. This has given rise to what is known as the Shadow Fleet or Dark Fleet. A phantom navy of more than 600 dilapidated, uninsured and rusting tankers now silently sails the globe. To conceal their activities, these vessels disable their GPS tracking systems, a practice known as going dark, which allows them to conduct clandestine ship-to-ship oil transfers in open waters, effectively erasing the oil's origin. It's a lawless new era on the world's oceans. In the event that one of these phantom tankers has an accident and unleashes millions of barrels of crude oil into the sea, no insurer exists to cover the catastrophic cleanup costs. So who bears the cost? The natural world. And of course, the citizens of whichever nation's coastline is unfortunate enough to be in the path of the spill. This reflects the new state of international commerce. It's a system defined not by efficiency, but by its complete opposite. It is wasteful, hazardous, and far more costly for everyone involved. These days, Europe is sourcing its liquefied natural gas or LNG from the United States and Qatar. To get there, the gas is chilled to negative 162 degrees, loaded onto specialized tankers, and then shipped all the way across the Atlantic, only to be converted back into its gaseous state upon arrival. Let's crunch the numbers. Transporting gas through a pipeline is incredibly cheap, costing mere pennies. When it comes to LNG, however, the cost skyrockets into dollars for the same amount. The outcome is that European industry now faces a permanent competitive disadvantage compared to where it stood just 5 years ago. Consider a company like BASF, the single largest chemical producer on the planet. They are permanently shuttering factories in Germany and relocating their operations to, you guessed it, the United States and China. This great energy realignment serves as a stark reminder that location is once again king. The days of simply buying energy from whomever offered the lowest price are gone. Now you must source it from a politically friendly nation, and that kind of friendship comes with a significant markup. For the great subsidy showdown, a race to the bottom. So if we cannot rely on global supply chains, which was our first point, and if we can't depend on our adversaries for technology or for energy as we covered in points 2 and 3, what is the alternative? You essentially bribe corporations to onshore their operations. This signals the return of industrial policy. For 40 years, that very term was considered toxic within Western governments. The established view was that the state must not attempt to pick winners and losers. That was a decision to be left entirely to the free market. If the market calculated that manufacturing solar panels in China was 20% more affordable, then that was the end of the story. That entire philosophy is now dead and gone. In its place, we have the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, in the United States. Don't let the name fool you. This policy has precious little to do with controlling inflation and is entirely about engaging in economic warfare. The United States government is effectively showing up with a dump truck overflowing with cash, $369 billion, and likely far more. They're parking it right on the doorsteps of companies and making an offer if you decide to build your batteries on our soil, if you process your lithium here, if you handle the final assembly of your electric vehicles here, we will give you a massive payout. And the strategy is proving effective. Enormous factories are now popping up in places like Ohio, Arizona, and Georgia. But this created a ripple effect. The moment the US began distributing this free money, a wave of panic hit Europe. Their leaders cried foul, saying, "That is completely unfair. You are diverting all of the investment capital away from Europe." Consequently, the EU introduced its own subsidies, which prompted South Korea to create its own program, and then Japan and China followed suit. China, of course, has been playing this game for many years, but now they are putting their foot on the accelerator. We find ourselves in a full-blown subsidy arms race. Every major global power is now allocating billions of taxpayer dollars to replicate supply chains that are already fully functional. We are now erecting microchip foundries in the water-starved deserts of Arizona and constructing battery facilities in the old industrial regions of Germany. So what's the issue here? The problem is that this is a profoundly inefficient system. Instead of having one global facility that can make a product for $1, we now have 5 separate national facilities, each making that same product for $3. You end up paying for this inefficiency in 2 distinct ways. First, as a taxpayer, your money is being used to fund these huge corporate giveaways. Second, as a consumer, the item you purchase is significantly more expensive because it wasn't produced in the location with the highest efficiency. It was produced in the location that offered the most political benefit. We are consciously tearing down the efficiencies of the global marketplace in order to purchase national security. This is analogous to buying an insurance policy for your house, only the annual premium costs the same as the house itself. Let's hit pause for a moment. I'm curious to read your take in the comments. Is it a government's duty to pay companies to operate domestically, or is this simply corporate welfare masked as patriotism? Number 5, the revolt of the global south and the BRICS gold rush. While the United States and Europe are consumed with building their fortresses of subsidies, the rest of the planet is not just standing by waiting for an invitation to trade, they are constructing a clubhouse of their own. This is where BRICS Plus enters the picture. For many years, economists in the West openly mocked the BRICS alliance. It was widely dismissed as a glorified debate club, a stage for leaders to vent their frustrations with America and snap a few pictures. But in 2022, the mood shifted dramatically when the West transformed the US dollar into a weapon freezing Russia's financial reserves. No one was joking then. Nations across the developing world watched this unfold and had a chilling realization: if a country's $300 billion can be vaporized with a simple keyboard command, who's to say we won't be next? This sparked a profound change. An urgent scramble began to build an escape route from the dollar's dominance. But let's be clear about something. The American dollar isn't about to collapse overnight. It remains the world's reigning currency. However, its crown is beginning to slip. What's emerging is a world of separate competing monetary zones. Beijing is now settling its oil bills with Saudi Arabia using its own currency, the yuan. Meanwhile, India attempted to use rupees for Russian oil, but lopsided trade flows pushed them to adopt the UA dirham, and even the yuan finding ways to operate outside the dollar system. You're looking at a supercharged, high-stakes global trading network. Yet the most revealing clue isn't the currencies themselves. It's gold. Governments around the world are hoarding gold at a rate not witnessed since the 1960s. The reason is simple: gold is the ultimate asset because it isn't based on another country's promise to pay. A bar of gold stored in a vault in Shanghai cannot be frozen by foreign sanctions. This is the very picture of a world breaking apart. We are transitioning away from a single global currency system toward a new reality: multiple blocks each with its own set of rules. Just picture a future where your credit card functions perfectly in New York or London, but is useless in Beijing or Mumbai simply because the financial networks are no longer connected. That future is closer than you think. Number 6. The population time bomb. The decline of the Made in China era. Let me tell you the unspoken truth about the first wave of globalization 1.0. Its success wasn't built on free trade alone, it was built on an ocean of cheap labor. More precisely, it relied on absorbing hundreds of millions of young low-cost workers from China into the world's production lines during the 1990s and 2000s. We all became accustomed to a seemingly endless stream of people ready to build our smartphones for just $2 an hour. For anyone banking on perpetually low prices, I have some bad news: that well has run dry. Right now, China is experiencing a population implosion faster than any seen in history, barring major wars or pandemics. As of 2023, its population is officially in decline. By the year 2050, the country is projected to lose a number of people equivalent to the entire population of the US. This is what's known as the Lewis turning point. That's the critical juncture where the excess labor pool disappears, causing salaries to shoot upward. The Made in China label simply doesn't mean cheap anymore. Over the past 10 years, wages for factory workers in China have multiplied by 3. Corporations are now scrambling to places like Vietnam, India and Mexico, desperately searching for the next manufacturing giant. But there's a catch. There isn't another China waiting in the wings. Vietnam, for instance, just doesn't have the scale. India has the manpower, but it's held back by inadequate infrastructure and a lack of centralized direction. Mexico is a strong contender, but its costs are also on the rise. So how does this affect you? It signals the end of an entire economic chapter, one defined by globalization, keeping prices down. For 30 years, this vast supply of inexpensive labor effectively subsidized the way we live. It acted as a brake on inflation even as central banks were creating more money. That subsidy has now vanished. Looking ahead, the things you buy won't be assembled by a low-wage worker. Instead, they'll be built by a costly robot. And robotics require massive initial investment. We are moving into a new reality where workers are in short supply. This shifts the balance of power, forcing wages up and as a result pushing up the prices you see in stores. The era of the China price is over. Welcome to the age of the inflation price. Before we move on, if you're finding this exploration into why everything feels more expensive useful, please take a moment to click the like button. It really helps the algorithm connect with others who are also trying to make sense of our economic future. Number 7, the green wall. This is protectionism dressed up in environmental clothing. We've already covered the conflicts over technology and energy. Now it's time to discuss the trade wars being fought over climate. You might assume that environmental rules are all about protecting endangered species, and to some extent that's true, but on the global stage any policy can be turned into a strategic weapon. This brings us to something called CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. That's a complex name created by European officials for what is essentially a huge tax on imported goods. Let me break it down. Within the European Union there are very stringent environmental regulations. Their factories are required to purchase permits for their carbon emissions, which significantly increases the cost of producing steel in a place like Germany. At the same time, manufacturing steel in countries like India or Turkey costs less because their environmental standards are looser. So the EU has declared that if you want to sell steel produced with higher emissions inside Europe, you'll be charged a border tax designed to level the playing field with their own more cleanly produced steel. Officially, the policy is framed around tackling climate change, but its actual function is to serve as a barrier for economic protection. It effectively blocks emerging economies from competing with European industries on price. The United Kingdom is following the same playbook. America is now considering its own version of these carbon-based taxes, which is creating a global divide with two distinct economic blocks. On one side, you have the expensive environmentally regulated Western nations. On the other, you have the rest of the world operating with lower costs and fewer regulations. From the perspective of a developing nation, this feels deeply unfair. They are calling it a new form of colonialism dressed in green. Imagine you're finally building your economy, and the wealthy countries who became rich by polluting for centuries are now slamming the door shut and penalizing you for attempting the very same path to prosperity. This situation is generating enormous international tension, causing potential trade agreements to collapse before they even begin. Global supply chains are being compelled to restructure, prioritizing carbon footprints over operational efficiency. It's a move that could very well signal the end for the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization's core principle forbids discrimination against imported goods. These new carbon tariffs essentially defy that rule outright. The world is fracturing into green economic blocks. To do business with the West, you'll be forced to comply with their strict environmental regulations. And if meeting those standards is too costly, your only option is to trade with nations like China or Russia, which have far fewer requirements. But here is the twist. This whole dynamic could paradoxically hinder the global economic growth needed to fund the very green initiatives being pushed. 8. The splinter net. The concept of the Great Firewall is no longer confined to one country. It's expanding worldwide. We have discussed the fragmentation of physical items like oil and microchips. However, there is another domain that is breaking apart right now, the digital world we all share. For about 20 years, the prevailing idea was of a single unified internet, a shared global space where a teenager in Rio and another in Tokyo could enjoy the exact same viral content. That vision has died. Welcome to the era of the splinter net. The trend began with China's Great Firewall, which restricted access to platforms like Google and Facebook. At the time, we dismissed it as something unique to China. Now, however, it is a global phenomenon. Europe's General Data Protection Regulation has essentially built a digital fortress around the European Union's data. Russia developed RUNET, a domestic internet. It can disconnect from the global network instantly. And then there is the United States. The US government is aggressively pushing to either outlaw or compel the sale of TikTok, an application owned by a Chinese company with 150 million users in America. The real issue is not viral dance videos. It is about control over information or data sovereignty. Nations now understand that data is the most valuable resource of our time, and they are determined to prevent their citizens' personal information from being stored on computer servers located in adversarial nations. How does this impact the business world? It spells the end of launching a product or service worldwide simultaneously. For a technology startup in today's climate, a single global app release is impossible. You need to develop a US version, a separate European Union version, which adheres to stringent privacy regulations, and an entirely different version for the Chinese market, assuming you can even get access. This new reality shatters the process of innovation and drives up the cost of doing business everywhere. It creates barriers that prevent the free flow of ideas. The once open World Wide Web is transforming into a collection of isolated, walled-off digital gardens. We are moving into a future where the version of reality you experience is dictated by your digital nationality. 9. The decade of inflation. It is time to pay up. So far, we have explored collapsing supply chains, conflicts over technology and energy, crunch, shifting population dynamics, and the rise of digital borders. If you connect all these different trends, they all point to a single powerful outcome: inflation. This might be the single most critical point of our discussion. For 30 years, the forces of globalization worked to consistently push prices down. It gave companies the ability to keep both wages and consumer prices low by taking advantage of cheaper labor overseas and operating as if national boundaries did not exist. The reversal of globalization by its very nature pushes prices up. Just consider the logic. Constructing a second factory for the sake of redundancy is more expensive. Transporting energy as liquefied natural gas is more expensive than using a pipeline. Employing an American worker costs more than employing a Vietnamese worker. Maintaining a stockpile of emergency inventory also adds to the cost. Our economic focus is shifting away from maximizing efficiency and toward ensuring resilience. And resilience comes with a hefty price tag. Central banks can hike interest rates as much as they like, but higher rates cannot magically create more workers. Interest rates cannot construct a semiconductor plant in Arizona, and they certainly cannot force Russia to resume its gas sales to Germany. We are almost certainly heading into an era of deep-seated structural inflation. The era of stable 2% inflation is likely over. The future we face is one of greater price volatility and higher overall costs. This is not to say we are headed for Armageddon. It simply means the era of artificially cheap goods has come to an end. From now on, we will have to bear the true cost of our way of life. 10. Final thoughts. The New World Order. So what is the final verdict? Has globalization truly come to an end? Not completely. We are not about to regress to a pre-industrial state. International commerce will continue. You will still be able to purchase bananas from other countries and enjoy animated shows from Japan. That dream from the 1990s is a thing of the past. The fantasy of a single harmonious border-free global marketplace is officially over. In its place, we're seeing a world that's fracturing and realigning. We are now huddling into distinct camps. There's the democratic alliance with the US, the EU, Japan, Australia, and South Korea. Then you have the autocratic axis comprising China, Russia, Iran and North Korea. And finally, there are the non-aligned players like India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, all of whom are hedging their bets. Commerce will flow easily within these spheres, but trying to trade between them will be filled with obstacles. This ushers in a far more volatile era, one where commercial competitors are also strategic adversaries. It's an environment where commercial disputes could ignite into actual conflict much quicker than we are willing to acknowledge. And yet there is an upside to all this. This widespread upheaval also opens up new possibilities. For decades, we completely neglected our own domestic capabilities. Our manufacturing sectors were left to wither away because bringing in goods from overseas was simply more cost-effective. Now we are compelled to reinvest at home. We're being driven to pioneer new solutions and to prioritize long-term stability over short-term financial gains. This transition is bound to be turbulent and it will certainly be costly, and we should all buckle up for a very unpredictable journey. The notion of the end of history has been shattered. History has returned with a vengeance, and it appears to be making up for lost time. The fact that you're still here tells me you're the type who wants to grasp how the system works, not just be a passive cog within it. If this exploration has sparked some deep thoughts, or even just clarified why your new car has such a high price tag, then I have a big ask for you. First, hit the like button. That signals to the platform that thought-provoking material deserves a wider audience. Second, make sure you subscribe. Our next deep dive will be into the economics of warfare, and that is something you will not want to skip. Third, leave a comment below. Is this fracturing world making you reconsider your investment or saving strategies? I will be reading every single response, especially in the first hour. Thank you for tuning in. Take care, always question things, and I will see you in the next one.